was surprising to find that the CIA funded studies that proved astral travel and that governments often use psychics to aid their agendas. So it is almost not surprising that there have been many state-funded expeditions to find ancient underground cities of myth and legend, including one led by Neil Armstrong himself. These missions either failed or the results were kept secret, and believe it or not, the failure option is most likely the case, and there is a good reason why. While exploring the concept of Agartha and Shambala, I had full intentions on explaining that it was an allegory representing the wisdom of the inner self, the Earth's crust being our body or circumstances, and the inner Earth being our spiritual centers of knowing. I assumed this allegory because Agartha has been described as a heavenly place by some and as an absolute hell by others, just like the Kundalini within us is experienced. But while reading, the impossible coincidences and cross-referencing became so much more than I bargained for. So much evidence pointed to a literal place that this video was thrust in an entirely different direction. Before we confront this paradox though, let's describe the inner workings of Agartha according to a multitude of ancient mythologies and modern-day findings. These separate viewpoints have a lot more in common than we thought. Reigning magnificently free from war, natural disasters, and yuga cycles that wipe clean human knowledge from the Earth's surface every so many centuries, Agartha sits unmoved yet not stagnant beneath our world, holding wisdom collected from all great sages of civilizations forgotten by us, lost to pre-recorded history, that is, our current thin scope of history. With the centers inhabited by twice and thrice born yogis and many not-so-human creatures dwelling the outskirts, Agartha is said to be layered out in symmetric circles just like Plato described Atlantis, where these scholars and OG scientists study the very fabric of reality and the soul, free from the limits of funding and ego. The spiritual technology in this place is so far beyond our logical understanding that it would appear to be magic if the viewer even be capable of seeing it with unwitting eyes at all. This place is a faithful image that reflects the eternal logos without deviation from the primordial first cause. The highest circle at its mysterious center hosts 12 cardinal members of wisdom incomprehensible to modern man, supreme initiates who have endured the hells necessary to obtain such knowing, great teachers that keep gilded stone libraries of knowledge safe from the eyes of the profane, sharing this knowledge to the people of the surface when and only when the times are right, carefully calculated according to the zodiacs and the dynamics of the Earth's yuga cycles, of which we share a collective mind that dips and zeniths with the Earth as one. Here, scholars perform great works in solitude, each taking quarters within what might be described as a colossal chessboard extending to almost every region beneath the Earth's surface, like pockets of hidden alchemical epiphanies, waiting patiently for us dwelling on the surface to grow from our child hive mind and bloom into the individuation of authentic self-knowing. All of the dynamic ups and downs of humanity's time on Earth resides categorized within each square of this perfected chessboard, making our decisions and free will one with the fate of these record keepers and even the off-world celestial realms. Just as our children are important to us, we are important to these watchers and their subtle influence. We walk the middle path between the divine and the profane, causing ripples in both directions. This is by design, and we will come back to that. But more often than we might suspect, uninitiated persons have stumbled into this sacred realm, finding themselves face to face with the emerald pages of this cosmic codex, only to find its power blindingly unbearable to their unprepared eyes. Like a confrontation with the unintegrated Jungian shadow, the person of ignorance realizes he has descended into a tomb that permanently blocks his cries from the ears of those who warned him, realizing that he will never again be heard by any visible being. Seeking the pleasures of unearned wisdom, he has found utter hell, the terrifying memorial of all human minds. However, this place is far from all doom and gloom, because many learned initiates and sages have passed through this barrier, having proven themselves worthy of the 7 hieratic names, the 7 celestial spheres, and the 7 awakened energy centers within the 7 cities of timeless Agartha. These hierophants are now permitted to come and go as they please, as they are now trusted with knowledge that can create worlds and or destroy them. And these powers have been exercised before the unsuspecting eyes of humanity throughout history, and continue to in our modern day, birthing sages of many names that we are familiar with today as legend. But legend and myth do not mean fiction in the slightest sense. Indeed, this knowledge has been periodically brought to the surface, catapulting events like the spiritual mastery of the Indus Valley, the impossible structures of cosmic messages held in the mathematics of the Great Pyramids, and the electromagnetic power of Cambodian temples now shut off due to the recessive dip of the Yuga cycle, and in modern times catapulted science and technology through a unity consciousness shared with those sensitive to the pervading collective mind of Agartha. Names like Nikola Tesla, Carl Jung, and Edgar Cayce, among many others like shamans who have stated that their ideas are not their own, but come from elsewhere. Elsewhere being from a central source, a transmission to anyone with a qualified mind to receive. Wisdom shut down by those willfully profane enough to use, then erase profundity via the governing deception created in Babylon, like done to the surprisingly recent Tartaria. But this transmission is calling out to all to understand, including you, beckoning us to reunite the bleeding limbs of humanity's failures and potentials. The keepers of this realm live long lives of many centuries as they are able to move their sentience from one bodily vehicle to another, just like those in Atlantis. Atlantis, home to the greatest alchemist and polymathematician of all time. Of all the sages to bring wisdom to men, one stands out more than any, a sage who also comes and goes as he sees fit, tempered in the fiery teachings of the underground yet cosmic halls of Amenti, a man transcended from mundane flesh to that of godlike spirit, has dedicated each one of his incarnations to the service of mankind, a being that we have come to call the thrice greatest, a being called Thoth, the Spaceborn. So, the Pyramid of Cholula is the largest in the world by volume. The native lore states that a giant called Xelhua came from inner earth and designed this monument. It is also stated that emerging from the same place were 7 tribes of 7 cities that decided that the giants should not be on the surface and hunted them down. When we hear about giants and the number 7 being used, we are quick to assume that this is allegory. But there is something deeper here, because when studying this pyramid, we find something truly puzzling. Ground-penetrating radar shows 5 more pyramids beneath this top layer. The deepest 3 we know nothing about, as well as underground tunnels that have been mapped out to the point of 5 miles. But 5 miles is only as far as the radar would allow. These tunnels continue down, and we have no idea how far. This reminds us of what we have covered about the Hopi legend of the ant people coming from underground to teach the natives about agriculture. An interesting side note is that the Hopi word for ants is Anu, and their word for friend is Naki. Just like the Dogon tribe who describe the orbits of binary star systems that are not visible to the naked eye, it seems that all these allegories have more and more literal truth to them the deeper that we go. The Great Global Flood was considered allegory, for example, and of course we now know how real that literally was. The more we know, the weirder it seems to get. After what we learned about the moon in the previous video and there being a perfectly symmetrical humanoid face on Mars that NASA was busted orange-handed trying to cover up, I am beginning to see that these extraordinary stories that we consider allegory may have been inspired by real, tangible truth. This realization certainly must also apply to ancient figures like Thoth the Atlantean, but we'll come back to that. There are multiple ancient underground cities built by people like Derinkuyu beneath the surface of Turkey. And this stunning image is not AI produced. This is a real place that housed tens of thousands of people for reasons that are a complete mystery to this day. We seem to assume that we have reality figured out, and when someone like Galileo turns that reality on its head, we are quick to snuff them out, only to prove them to be correct later. The proof part of that seems to take a lot more time than the snuffing out part, until eventually the truth behind what this crazy person is saying turns out to be self-evident, like Galileo explaining that the Earth orbits the sun and not the other way around. This is the same slow progression from denial to truth that we are seeing happen right now with this impossible recent new moon information. The first line in the Emerald Tablets states the famous axiom, as above, so below. As it is in the microcosm, it is the same on the macrocosmic scale. Like Russian dolls of realities, similar to that pyramid in Cholula that we just mentioned. While exploring a creek bed near our home, my son came running to me a few months ago with a damn near perfectly spherical stone. The ball shape is what made him certain that it was hollow and filled with crystals. So we split it open, and sure enough, it was absolutely dazzling with beauty. Transparent, glassy crystals of purple and pinks. This was geode, and the inner beauty was concealed by the dirty, stone-crusted outside shell. This made me wonder about both this recent moon anomaly and in the legends of beings living near the center of the Earth, in places that are said to be beautiful beyond our imagination. Geodes form because of pockets of air inside rock, typically due to the cooling of volcanic stone that cools from a liquid to a solid. When water seeps in, it brings in minerals that, after thousands or even millions of years, form the crystals inside. We have been taught that the Earth itself was once a mostly molten ball of lava that cooled in this same way. So how sure are we that the Earth doesn't have a giant dazzling pocket within it? We don't know how far in caves go, but ancient advanced people of legend might have. And being advanced certainly saw that the surface of Earth is subject to solar flares, great floods, meteors, perfect storms, you name it. We are exposed to a lot of deadly shit that seems to reset humanity from time to time. Just look at the way that ancient architecture of Egypt seems to decrease drastically in quality from the oldest works to the newest. The newer workings are Super duper, sure. But the older we look in Egypt, the more impossible the masonry is, bringing speculative certainty that we have forgotten something truly great due to our modern amnesia or some kind of global reset. If there are indeed wonderful pockets within the earth that are safe from all of this chaos that we are subject to on the surface, surely an advanced civilization would recognize it as a safe place to keep ancient records and continue to advance their technology. Now, this sounds very literal in nature, so how can it be so that these legends speak of inner earth regions as both heaven and hell? I think that our minds are still stuck in dualistic thinking. We always assume that it must be one way or the other and tend to forget that, like allegory, sometimes there is not only a gray area, but it can be both poles simultaneously. So gravity is weird. We still don't know what gravity is or how it works definitively. We have good theories at best. As something gets closer to a black hole, the more weird its reality becomes. Physics completely breaks down and stops making sense until eventually, at the edge of the event horizon, all matter becomes sheer information, like ones and zeros, completely not tangible anymore. On the other side of that event horizon, we have absolutely no idea at all. This high strangeness has a lot to do with gravity. It seems that the laws of physics are local. In other words, physical reality is subject to bending and shaping just as much as the mind is. Could it be that, like a black hole, the closer we get to a giant gravitational force, the less materialized the fabric of reality becomes? If we indeed project reality from within and the all is mind, could it be that the Hermetic laws, like cause and effect, act differently in different places? We are very much programmed to live and survive in this very specific place that we call the surface. And when we rip down that barrier of realness, like is done with the spirit molecule dimethyltryptamine, the result can be very beautiful or terrorizing, but equally powerful in either case. Now, I am not saying that DMT takes us into Agartha, but it is worth noting because it does certainly show us that the reality that our biology is tuned to is very frail and thin compared to the entire scope of what can be called real. What if this so-called place called Agartha is also not localized to our understanding of physics? What if there is a center point of all things big and small where reality just comes off of its hinges? After all, the pineal gland, or seat of the soul known as the mind's eye, is located in the center of the brain, like the crystals in a geode. Why would a celestial body be any different? The earth has ley lines and a magnetic field just like we do with chakras and energy centers. If the earth is alive, like we have hypothesized in previous videos, it would seem that our reality is located on the skull, whereas Agartha would be located within the brain of it. Within the brain, metaphorically speaking, of course, closer to where the thoughts take place, where cause and effect and the other Hermetic laws are more instant. Can a place or a person be both matter and mind at once? Perhaps this way of existence is the reality that is normal, and the world we take in and or project is actually rare in the universe. Well, if we look at this from a sidereal point of view, the message of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth seem to take on a whole new meaning. This alchemical manuscript can be read in many ways depending on the level and path of the reader. After reading much material that seems to connect Thoth with Agartha, a few passages of the tablets caught my attention. The mighty ones of Atlantis did not live and die. Rather, from eon to eon, they renewed their lives in the halls of Amenti, where the river of life flows eternally onward. I have descended the dark way that leads into light 1,000 times, and 1,000 times I have ascended from darkness into light, my strength and power renewed. Now for a time I descend, and the men of Chem, Egypt, shall know me no more. I approached the light emitted from the great fire. He taught me the path to Amenti, the underworld where the great king sits upon his throne of might. I looked into the hearts of men where I found even greater mysteries, and I was glad. That great king seems to remind us of the Brahma mentioned in the lore of Agartha. Deep in earth's heart, the sons of Amenti heard, and hearing directed the changing of the flower of fire that burns eternally, changing and shifting using the logos until the great fire changed its direction. The great waters broke over the world, drowning and sinking all, changing earth's balance until only the temple of light was left standing. Long we dwelt in the land of Chem. I sent the sons of Atlantis from me in many directions, that from the womb of time wisdom might rise again in her children. And this kind of reminds us why we have so many similar architectural structures all over the world after the Great Flood. Now for a time I go among them into the dark halls of Amenti, before the lords of the powers, deep in the halls of the earth, face to face once again with the dweller. High over the entrance I raised a doorway, a gateway leading down to Amenti. Few would have the courage to dare it. Few passed the portal to dark Amenti. Over the passage I raised a great mighty pyramid, using the power of gravity that overcomes Earth's force. Deep and yet deeper I placed a force house or chamber, and remember this for later when we talk about the Sphinx. There in the apex I set the crystal. I built other chambers and left them seeming vacant, yet hidden within them are the keys to Amenti. He who in courage would dare the dark realms, let him be purified first by long fasting. You're gonna have to stay away from Applebee's before going in there. Even in the darkness of earth I shall meet him. And it says A-Y-E, while I sleep in the halls of Amenti, my soul, roaming free, will incarnate and dwell among men in this form or another. And just like Saint Yves speaks of the astral travels of the Agarthians who come to the Earth's surface in spirit form in order to conduct studies and inhabit the bodies of men to help direct them along. Deep in the Earth's heart lie the halls of Amenti, far beneath the islands of Sunken Atlantis, bathed in the fire of the infinite all. Referring to the logos, I do believe. Down they descended and created bodies. This reminds us of almost every ancient lore of aboriginals all over the earth who speak about shapeshifters that live underground, that can change their form. And of course, we look at the Egyptian deities that, like Thoth, are part animal. Then, for a dwelling place far beneath Earth's crust, they blasted great spaces by their power, spaces apart from the children of men. They surrounded them with forces and power, shielding them from harm, the halls of the dead. There in the circle from eon to eon sit the great masters, living a life not known among men. There in the halls of life they lay sleeping. Free flows their soul through the bodies of men, teaching and guiding onward and upward, out of the darkness and into the light. And I can't help but hypothesize, speculate, that what they're describing here is what happens whenever men have great ideas, like Nikola Tesla, Carl Jung, Edgar Cayce, for example, or even whenever inventions happen, they pop up on different sides of the earth at the same time. 2, 3, even 4 men will come up with the same invention or idea at precisely the same time all over the world. Seated within the flower of radiance sit 7 lords from the space-times above us, custodians and watchers of the force of man's bondage, ready to lose it when the light has been reached. There they sit, mighty and potent, free of all time and space. They are the elder brothers of the children of men. Judging and weighing with their wisdom, they watch the progress of light among men. Watching the progress of men,
kind of reminds us of what we covered in our previous video about the moon. Downward he led me into the hall where resides the great dark death, vast as space, walled by darkness yet filled with light. There we got both right there. Forward he led me through many great spaces filled with the mysteries of the children of light. Forward he led me through many great spaces filled with the mysteries that man may never yet know of, until he too is a son of the light. There I knelt before the great masters, lords of all from the cycles above. And now I tread the path downward, seeking the light in the darkness of night. And this kind of reminds us of what Jung tells us about confronting the shadow to gain individuation. Listen, O man, and be wise. Far beneath the earth's crust, in the halls of Amenti, mysteries I saw that are hidden from men. Often I have journeyed the deep hidden passage and looked on the light that is the life among men. And I wonder if this kind of is referring to the prana mentioned in Hinduism. When it comes to the connection of Hinduism and Egyptian lore, keep this in mind for later. The pathway is clear to he who has wisdom. Open the door to the kingdom of light. Take as part of your being the seven who are not as they seem. I have opened my wisdom. Follow the path in the way that I have led. And there's that number 7 again that I can't help but feel like refers to the chakras, like we covered in our video, biblical numerology. Freely I give my wisdom, gathered from the time and space of this cycle. That's that yuga, baby. Man too might live and be free. You are not of the earth. You are a child of the infinite cosmic light. To throw one way out there, because we've got that human face on Mars, showing that this human form doesn't seem to be necessarily restricted to have been evolved from the earth. It seems to have a common archetype throughout the cosmos. I mean, after all, it does say made in God's image. I am not saying that the halls of Amenti lead to Agartha, but correct me if I'm wrong that everything we just read there perfectly describes what was covered in our intro. When we mix all of this with the physical evidence that backs up myth, I am seeing a major connection. And if that is not enough, our friend Edgar Cayce, the proven clairvoyant of recent times, stated that while tapped into his Akashic record, that Thoth hid a library of knowledge beneath the left paw of the Sphinx. He said this many years before we had the sonar technology that did in fact prove there to be a giant room exactly in that specific spot. Another case of modern science accidentally lending credence to what we once thought to be only an allegory. But the basic theme remains. A person worthy of wisdom by righteous living may pass into that world that would otherwise be an absolute hell. And this darkness is what creates the light of wisdom to those who are worthy. A wisdom written in stone that cannot be removed from its place deep within the earth. This leads me into the story of the man who did it in Edinburgh. It's, right here, but damn it, I'm gonna have to, that is an amazing story it's gonna deserve its whole entire video on its own. Nevertheless, once this wisdom is attained to the initiate, he then becomes, born again, as it is called here, the spaceborn, a shortcut to the stars. And not to drop many teasers here, but I also found connections not mentioned here to the face and cities on Mars and Cydonia, something that we will cover in next week's video. The way this is described also happens to be the way that the underground city of Shambala is described in Tibetan scriptures. And the list goes on. There is another thing that all of these tablets, scriptures, and oral traditions and religions have in common, that we have watchers that keep records of man and wait a bit impatiently for us to grow to a high enough sentience to handle their return into our visible reality. And anyone who has done dimethyltryptamine, well, tell me what you see there didn't reflect that. It's like they know that the cycle of yugas have inhibited man's growth, so they are patient despite being eager. But to reveal themselves prematurely would cause absolute devastation to the psyche of mankind. The power of Thoth is not to be taken lightly, by the way, as many of you know that the tomb of Tutankhamun had clear warnings at the entrance that it was guarded by the technology of Thoth's power, and anyone who entered would meet a fate worse than death. Well, within a 2-year period after the excavation, all 11 men died of brutal circumstances except for one who had to cowardly hide inside of his home to avoid the fate of his buddies, only to eventually hang himself inside of his home, leaving a note saying that he could not escape the madness that followed him since this excavation, since this trespassing. That is enough evidence to show that this is real, even if it was a case of placebo effect. These men are dead, and we don't teach these things in schools. How absurd is that to ignore? It literally catapulted an entire genre of movies based on this real event. They, of course, made these out to be fiction. There is a passage from St. Yves' book on Agartha that I would like to read directly concerning the connection between inner Earth and the cosmos that I just couldn't phrase better myself. When speaking of the inhabitants of Agartha, he says, during the great prayer days, during the celebration of the cosmic mysteries, although the sacred hierograms are recited in a tone little more than a whisper inside the immense underground dome, a strange acoustic phenomenon takes place on the surface of the earth and in the skies. The travelers and the caravans that wander far during the light of day or on clear nights come to a halt, both men and beast anxiously listening. It seems to them that the earth itself has opened up its lips to sing. An immense harmony with no visible cause is in fact floating through space. It unfolds in a growing spiral and tenderly shakes the atmosphere with its waves, then rises to be engulfed in the heavens as if seeking there for the ineffable. Whether Arabs or Parsis, Buddhists, Afghans, Tartars, or the Chinese, all travelers respectfully gather their thoughts and listen in silence, and softly utter their orisons in the great universal soul, a veritable pyramid of light enclosing the bond of an impenetrable secret. Whether it be Moses or Orpheus, Solon or Pythagoras, Fohi or Zoroaster, Krishna or David, every applicant, every student must begin at the bottom rung before making his way to the top, which, of course, the top would be the center in this case because the gravity is upside down. Well, not upside down, it's right side up according to you get it. Everything speaks and everything has meaning. Everything wears its own name, visibly written in its shape as a symbol of its nature. From the insect to the sun, from the subterranean fire that devours all matter to the celestial fire that absorbs all essence back into its being. What I am saying here must be taken literally as well as figuratively. By the way, it goes into detail about the scientific ways of how they utilize light in this great city, making it, of course, like we covered earlier, half literal, half allegorous. The physiological construction of the planet and the cosmos are known down to their very tiniest details, both physical and essential, both visible and invisible. Aerial fleets with dirigible balloons have carried observations to a degree that is wholly inaccessible to our current methods. And you guys might be fans of Mr. Mythos. I certainly am. He's probably my favorite YouTuber, but he just did a video about ultra-terrestrial beings and how that ties into these mysterious balloons that seem to gather water and do all kinds of different scientific experiments way before the Wright brothers had even thought to make flight, and there's records of these all over the world, and they are described as balloons or airships. Exactly right here describes that very thing. They study sociology of the entire universe. No telescope could accomplish such a thing. Thousands of souls from one century to the next up into the present, moved by an invincible faith and enlightened by absolute certitudes, have made the ascent into the heavens from star to star and from sphere to sphere. It kind of sounds like spaceborne, which also reminds us of what the so-called King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid seems to do, as it is aimed directly at that nearest star. They have explored in every direction the celestial city about which every religion speaks. So these scientists are not limited to material study like we are, which makes a lot of sense. Why do we leave out the basis of all reality in our current scientific networking? It goes on to talk about when an initiate is brought into this great city of Agartha, and everywhere furious at the sight of their home penetrated and invaded by men, a people of human shape and igneous bodies surge forth at the approach of the initiates and leap away on their wings in all directions to perch with their claws clinging to the plutonian walls of their city. They're not pleased whenever average human beings come into their city, and again reminds us of some of our DMT breakthroughs where we get in there and the inhabitants are either disgruntled or completely confused at our ability to get to that place. These people are the inhabitants of the central fire. They are the same who were visited by our Lord Jesus Christ before he ascended back into the sun, ensuring that the redemption would purify everything. In a previous video, upon the death of Jesus, he went down to preach the gospels to what he described as the imprisoned ones. Kind of sounds like these guards of Agartha. It goes on to talk about how the Agarthians created a species of giants through genetic blood working in order to do some of the labors up on the surface of this planet, which ties us right back to that pyramid in Cholula. And we have to remember the date that this book was written. This person was not aware of these findings that we have today. It's an old ass book. I mean, it's a new book of an old book. In addition to all we have seen, experiments of all kinds teach the soul to know itself, called ether in all of our languages, known as Akasha in Sanskrit. Although they have been brushed by the ether, these Promethean profaners will fall, as if struck by lightning, into the abyss of Ahankara, the elements of the individual ego and the instinct of life burned down to their bones, not by the tongues of the flame of the celestial spirit, but also by the fires. For the same celestial fire that inhales pure souls and sucks them into the spirit on high, spits the impure down into the igneous forces of the earth. And while the former are with the angels, blissfully enjoying celestial love, the others ride astride demons and are swallowed up in the gulfs of the infernal orgy. And I'm guessing that this is not the fun kind of orgy. So the question here remains as to why modern sages only speak of this inner earth in secrets and not out in the open like their other religious doctrines. It seems to be because the experience of over 5,000 years has taught them that the doors of Agartha are closed to the governments of armed anarchy, which is technically what we are as a society, in armed anarchy. I mean, we got thugs running the world, but only from time to time sending up anointed ones to help move humanity up and along, hoping that we will eventually see the signs that we are blind to and distracted from. These brotherhoods, these keepers, despite being shrouded in mystery, persevere with these secrets, knowing that they will be slain the moment they reveal too much. And it makes people think that they are the bad guys. But it seems that to acquire this trust takes a particular amount of sincerity, righteousness, honor, and loyalty. Not the kind of loyalty that you give to a sports team. Man, I was at Huck's the other day getting gas, and the dude goes, "Go ahead and enter your loyalty ID." And I was like, "Sir, this is a gas station. Y'all are acting like it's a like it's a quick trip or something. I'm sorry, but the only places that I need to show my loyalty in life is with family, friends, and your friendly neighborhood quick trip where you can get a breakfast pizza and a tall coffee combo for under $5. I think that the little sprouts of Agartha popped up and gave birth to these quick trips. I mean, damn, they're so fast. By the time you think you're getting in line, bam, you got a receipt and they're telling you to get the fuck out of here. A Quick Trip is the new Tartaria. Even the gas pumps at Quick Trip are all new touch screens and shit. And the Huck's gas pumps, they're still using rotary, I think. We have to unite science and spirit once again. It is said that the ways of ancient India and Egypt are the closest that we have come in semi-modern times to the ways of Agartha. And that begs the question, what did they have in common? Well, that answer is obvious: knowledge of the self with a capital S. So, ironically, it seems that the only way for them to come out is for us to go within. And that, my friends, is no allegory.
Is there anybody up there? It seems to me that ants don't realize when we are watching them. Now we affirm a strong grasp, but we assume that the book stops here, where humans build themselves up. I am absolutely in here, as much as I am out there. Is there anybody